think I get the impression that people were much more in their own skin, even though stuff died around them and life was hard and kids died and people died during pregnancy and food might have been scarce and the winters were really gnarly and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that necessarily there was this like kind of feeling of lack of belonging and being devoid of any kind of spiritual direction. And I think everything's flipped now, you know, like our lives are much, much easier, but we're all confused and don't really know what we're doing. And I'm often like, which one would you rather live in, you know?
I'm going to ask you about the future. I'm asking you some young wisdom for the future. Seems strange asking that to you, but yeah, what do you think is the future of like all this? Is that something you're researching and learning about? How you integrate AI into your workflow and like?
Yeah, actually, I gave AI a try for the first time ever last week, like ChatGPT for the first time last week, and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. It was like, I had no idea it was going to be that powerful.
What were you trying to understand?
Was
it about?
I tried to see what it'd be like. I want to kind of start doing some more script writing about like I wanted to do like a longer form video about different tree species, and I wanted to see obviously, and it was quite like a factual video about like the texture and the color of branches and the leaf shape and all these various things that were really kind of almost just facts rather than kind of opinions. And I wanted to see how quickly all that research could be collated rather than me having to find each one and bullet point it in my like notes app or something. And I gave it a go and it was just like instantly could give me all the facts. It was like, write a YouTube script for trees, for like, I don't know, a British tree guide or something. And it just gives you the whole thing.
Yeah, and you can say write shorter and write funnier.
Yeah, exactly.
Write it with more of this in. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'd probably use it for maybe a bit of a structure for factual things, so I didn't have to spend hours doing actual research. But I would never read it word for word. Like it's quite wooden the way that it talks, and I guess like you say, you could make it funny or whatever. But I don't think I'm there yet. You know, I don't want to. I'm quite happy to use these tools to, like the internet. I'm quite happy to use the tools for finding out facts. But you use those facts and that tool to leverage your own style and your own flair and your own like, opinion on these things, and like they kind of work in conjunction. As soon as you're like, I mean, if you type something in the internet, you can't just copy and paste what you found. We all know we can't do that now. Just copy and paste what you see on the internet. So you kind of tailor it to you, and you use bits of that, and like I mean like what I've been doing from school since writing essays at school. You know, you're always told you're not allowed to just copy and paste. So I also apply that to like AI. I don't want to just copy and paste something. So yeah, I don't know where it all fits. I find it really overwhelming, and I don't know how much I want it. There's days where I'm like, I feel like a bit of a mouse caught in a trap with it, and I want to try and get rid of it as much as I can. And had that period where I came off my iPhone for a while and went on my Nokia for last winter. And that was really important for me, but I reached a point where that became too difficult, and so I don't know what the answer is. You know, I'm trying to be more moderate with it. I either swing from like, right, I want to buy the newest iPhone, the newest Apple Watch, and the newest laptop, or I go like, fuck all of this, I'm going to buy a Nokia and just run away from it all. And I'm just trying to like not think about it at all, basically, and stay somewhere in the middle ground. But because I have a tendency to be extreme with it, because I think sometimes it's kind of got a grip of me.
What's your practice when you get stuck in that headspace of like overthinking potentially, which is bringing you out of your creative mode, which I imagine is more in your body and more in flow?
Yeah, I don't really have a practice. I like take it to the absolute extreme, and then luckily someone close to me goes like, "You're in a weird mood, Seth. You need to rein that in." And it kind of often takes quite an external source to pull me out of that. You know, I got myself into that, and I can't always use me to get out of it. So I'm quite fortunate that someone pulls me out of that. But there are if I'm forced to go and do something, or if I've booked something in where I know I'm not going to be on my phone, or I'm not going to be engaging with the technology and the media in that kind of way, that will create a physical divide. You know, if I'm going to a festival or an event or whatever, that will separate that, or work or shoot or whatever. But when I'm just at home for days and days at a time, I can sometimes find myself in these cycles that are kind of only broken by an external source.
Your dog?
My dog is a good one. Yeah, my dog's a really good one.
Look at you when you've been staring at that screen for a bit too long.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
He's phenomenal. Yeah. And like, I feel like we could talk the whole podcast about that relationship, which I observed through your medium. Instagram, and I'm like, there's so much more going on here than probably, that well, there's just so much happening. And there was one video that you mentioned about he knows when my mood has changed. Why wouldn't we think that's similar in terms of the other animals that are around us and the insects and all the life that we exist in? Well, that was really powerful.
Yeah. No, he's so receptive. And we spend so much time together that it's like...
Share the same nervous system.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like a third leg, He just... It's... The idea that he didn't know what my mental state was seems crazier to me than if he didn't know. Do you know what I mean? Like he does know. He doesn't, like, we don't communicate with words, or I can communicate with words. He doesn't communicate back with words. But
More powerful.
Yeah, but we communicate in so many other ways. And he was one of the things that made me realise what communication really is. Like you growing up, you learn that communication is reading, writing, and talking and things like that, and it's just so much deeper than that, And that's that's stage one of communication. And when you have an animal, particularly an animal that you have an outdoor off lead relationship with, I suppose, one that requires communication to navigate a not a particularly dog friendly nor human friendly world, you have to have like a level of communication so that he doesn't get run over by a car, or he doesn't do like shit at the wrong piece of the road or whatever. So like there's these kind of communications that you have that start to become quite unvocal, and he just knows. And having a dog has opened up so much for me. And just like we're saying, from the perspective of being too much time on my phone or laptop or looking at media or whatever, I know 2 times a day that dog is going to come and let me know that he needs to go out. So twice a day, every day, we go out for like an hour, morning and evening, and that breaks up whatever I do, and that really led to so many other things that I've learned over the last year about the world and about myself, because I just was like, you can't sit indoors all day. There were times when I was younger, but before I had a dog, where I would just spend winters just sat indoors, like hadn't left the house for 3 days or something. I'd be like, how the hell have I done that? And now I look back, I'm like, well, it's because you didn't have a dog. Didn't have that little thing that comes up to you and goes like, come on man, we should be out. Because if he's happy, I'm happy. He's an amazing representation of what like a wild being is. And the more I kind of follow that, I'm fine as well. He's a great kind of, they call it like a litmus test or something, like he's a great indicator.
Barometer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if he's uncomfortable and he's not really like, if he doesn't come in, or if he's not relaxed and he just can't be like, everything's fine, I'm going to chill now, normally there's something up with me, or there's something there's a need of his that I haven't accommodated, and the need of his is actually a much deeper reflection of a need of mine, which is to go out, to eat something, to go for, like, I don't know, to play, to not be inside for ages, like whatever it is. It's like he's an amazing kind of, I don't know, he just reminds me that I need to go and move around and be outside more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's a reminder of what we are, what we're a part of almost. Where does it come in then, where we have to train out the animal instincts somewhat? Because they're there. And in some dogs, it's almost like if there's food, they'll just consume and consume and consume. And it's almost like, I wonder where that instinct comes from. Or like just other things like jumping or whatever their instinct is. It's like we have to train these things out of them. Why does that fit into the conversation? And have you come across any? Yeah,
I come across those kind of exact things, really. For me, it comes down to trust for me. I trust that he's incredibly in tune with himself. And when I first got him, I was quite paranoid about the amount that I was going to feed him. Like, oh my God, I shouldn't feed him this much. And I remember my dad telling me actually with his dog that the way that our older dog didn't have any problems with food. Sometimes he'd eat it, sometimes he'd leave it. And the way we got to that place with my older dog was just giving him as much as he wanted whenever he wanted. And he self-regulated and he moderated. And he didn't have like a scarcity mindset around food. If he wanted more food, he could come and ask my dad to have more food. Be like, pour his bowl, or be like, oh, you have more then. There's days when my dog doesn't eat he might fast for 2 days. He doesn't touch his food for 2 days. And then there's days where he might want 4 meals instead of 2. and I leave that up to him. And there's like he's a super fit dog. We go out all the time, and he seems really self-regulating on that level. So I have to like almost take away my human conditioning of him and just imagine him more in kind of primal scenarios, more in wild scenarios, and trust that he knows what's best for him. And then how that kind of relays to myself as well, you know, and
kids,
yeah,
because kids can't communicate that well, with words. But how does it extrapolate out to? Because I do think kids and dogs are quite similar.
Absolutely,
you know.
Absolutely.
So what are we missing? I think sometimes with dogs we have a perception of a dog just being that thing. It's quite rigid. It's just that way. He's just crazy, and that's him.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, are we really tuning into where that shows up more? It's interesting. It's like that, the whole introspection that comes in with our children as well. I haven't got kids, you haven't got kids, but it's like we see it, we observe it. Yeah, fascinating.
No, it's amazing to watch him. You know, he's taught me so much. I'm so lucky to have him in my life. You know, so grateful that I got him when I did, and we've got a really special relationship now.
Does he feature in every video?
Most of it. He's not that good at coming filming with me. He's because of the kind of dog he is. He's like kind of overly switched on. You know, when I first got him and I put my hand in the pen of puppies, I put my hand in the pen. The reason I picked him was because he ran over to my hand. He was the most kind of receptive in the group, and that seems to have kind of extrapolated out. And he'll be 3 in a few weeks' time. To kind of, as he's become an adult dog, he's still like really conscious of the environment, you know. So when I'm filming, if I'm on the phone or if I'm filming and talking to a camera, he doesn't get it. He can't say, oh, he thinks there's someone there, and he spends his whole time barking at me, freaking out, trying to bring me sticks. He can't. He's switched on enough to know that like Seth's talking to someone. There must be something going on here, but he's not smart enough to realize that I'm talking to a piece of technology. And he often drives me absolutely nuts when I'm trying to record a video. So a lot of the time I leave him at home now, which is annoying because one of the reasons I started that was because I got to do it at the same time as walking the dog, film the video at the same time as walking the dog. But that's the way it is. So I try and separate them up now.
I guess it's with the attention of the words as well, because he'll pick up on that energy. It's different to talking to yourself. You know,
exactly.
He's probably like quite attuned to that being nice.
Yeah, it's the way that I talk as if I'm talking to someone almost, you know. And
do you visualize that in your creation process?
Not really, no. I don't think so. It's just the tone of voice change. Well, maybe I do. I guess maybe because I'm talking to the audience, so I guess I probably do. And maybe I talk to a camera or a voice note or a phone call and a human in a very different way than I communicate with him. And he's like really picks up on that, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like when we're recording an audio or something, how much we believe. It's like we're essentially just talking. To remove everything, you're just talking to a phone, but we believe it's going to be heard. So the belief is really in context of like what we're speaking about and how much we put into it. But really, we're just speaking these words. But like the belief is that it's going to be heard. It's interesting to just observe that. How different is that to like trying to like just speak to yourself? Yeah, it's interesting. I want to change lanes. Let's talk about how things have shifted potentially recently, as far as I know, or maybe like this year with your content. How has that like changed your relationships or the people that have come into your life? Maybe me inviting you on the podcast, and how do you receive that? Do you honor like the process that you've been on and the work you've created, the journey you're on, and does that inform the new relationships, or do you feel that people have a relationship with your content and not you, and they are actually they have a perception, as we all do, of like who you are in that space rather than who you are as Seth? How does that kind of, it's like one of the biggest things I want to understand about someone who has a lot of eyes potentially and ears on them, and then people come their way, and I'd like to understand that a bit more for you. How does it feel?
Mm.
You know, because it's almost like writing a book, and then people have
Mm-hmm.
a relationship with the book,
Mm-hmm.
and then they bring their own stories and their own, almost, they can put you on a, let's say, pedestal, because I can't think of another word, but it's like that kind of energy. Like, is there like things that come into that, and are you cautious about new relationships, or like what the thing is? And that, because an account on Instagram is like highly valued in, like, let's say, our circles, or like,
Mm-hmm.
and people can gravitate towards that to like be a part of it, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any like approach that you have that is like in your awareness?
I don't really have any approach right now because it's so new.
Mm.
Like, I don't really know, I have no idea what I'm doing with it. It's all so, like, it's a kind of position that I never thought I'd get to so quickly, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that I'm doing, it's like I've pretty much learned it that day or that week. And it has changed over the few months that I've had it, you know. I think there's a level of maybe like naivety sometimes with some of the relationships. Maybe, I don't know. Everyone seems pretty good.
Yeah.
People are generally pretty
Taking
good
it as it comes.
Yeah, like there was a few days at Medicine Festival where that was the first time where I ever got like recognised far from my home by quite a few people, and there was obviously quite a high like percentage of my followers who would go to a festival like Medicine, which I kind of understood. I kind of maybe anticipated it, but I also didn't think that it was definitely going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quite unwell the first day or two, and that threw me off. That made me quite anxious initially, and then I kind of eased into it. Just because it was new, I was like, oh my God, this is weird. Any person who looked at me or started coming my way, I started to think, oh, are they going to come and say that to me? And then I started to almost put a mask on before they got there.
Do they know who I am?
Yeah. And then they would just not, and then they would say hello to someone else.
Time. Are they aware?
Exactly, yeah. Well, that's one of the things that actually happened. Like some of them was there, they'd taken a lot of mushrooms, and they came up to me and they'd be like, I recognise you, I know you from somewhere. And I was like, I think 3 people have come up to me already saying that they reckon me from my Instagram. And I was like, oh, you probably recognise me from my Instagram. And he was like, no, that's not what it is. And then he turned around to the woman next to him and was like, I recognise you. And he was just like, just on mushrooms. He was in love with everyone.
He was seeing their soul.
And he was seeing their soul, and he recognised everyone there. And I instantly thought that he meant me from my Instagram in my kind of egoic mood at that point. And like,
wow.
And that was weird. I was like, not everyone recognises you because of that, you know. And that was that. It was almost it was like given to me. That opportunity has been like,
sure,
you know, not everyone here is going to be like that, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm navigating it. It's an odd place to be, but it's also I feel quite. There's nothing else I'd like to be known for than for reintroducing people to their local garden plants and running around barefoot. Like, if someone knows me in the street for those things, that's fine. You know, that I can really live with that. If I had a different kind of job and people knew my face for a different reason, maybe something that wasn't really aligned with, or maybe I kind of feel for actors or sometimes because they're not the person they're actually playing. So someone runs up to someone like Daniel Radcliffe and goes like, "You're Harry Potter, like I love Harry Potter," and it's like, man, that's not me. At least I'm me on it, and I'm just talking about things I love. So it doesn't bother me that much. I'm learning to navigate it. Most people are pretty good.
Great frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the people that gravitate towards that type of content are going to be people that you want to hang out with.
Exactly, yeah. And I've met so many amazing, like, for every 1,000 amazing people you meet, you might meet one that feels a bit odd or something, but, like, that's fine. I'm not going to not trust the world because every once in a while something odd happens, you know. I'd rather live in a mindset of trust and abundance and thinking that everyone's pretty good than spending my whole time being like, who's out to get me? The world's out to get me. Everyone's going to try and fuck me over. And then because you think like that, it does. You know, I don't want to live there. So I just choose not to live there, you know? Yeah.
When did that start making sense to you? Were you ever in that space of, because it's like you're speaking into reality, your own demise almost. You know, you're perpetuating some of the things that you fear the most by speaking to them and constantly fearing. I feel it's a somewhat of a stress response. You know, it's that living in that fear.
Yeah.
But do you see everything as an opportunity now? You just mentioned
it. Most of the time, yeah. Most of the time, I like to. I like to live in that space. And occasionally I have times where I either take that too far and maybe that becomes a bit naive. And I think that the world's like a kind of like a squishy place that can never hurt you, you know. And then sometimes I get into the headspace of taking it too far and the other way, you know, and thinking that everything is bad, you know. But
okay.
like, I don't know. I've generally over the last few years lived a lot more in the headspace of like, trust things. It will come. The more you fixate on distrust and thinking that the world's against you, the more that happens. Because I've seen that happen to myself, and I've seen that to other people, happen to other people. You know, so I just try and not choose that. You know, but it's hard sometimes.
It is hard. I often check myself when I bypass the human experience of what it is.
Yeah.
What it means to be human, which is, the uncomfortable understanding that we're going to die, that uncomfortable situation we're in that we don't know so much, and we have to just surrender to that great mystery of it all. Where does that fit into your day to day?
It used to fit into my day to day all the time, and I think it made me quite ungrounded. Interesting. Again, like similar to what you've said, I've like in the last few weeks, probably even, I've just been learning methods of regrounding and like coming back into that human experience. I started to use that. I don't know, that kind of ascensionist kind of headspace to kind of get myself out of tricky situations sometimes. You know,
what would that be?
Like, you know, for me to start kind of going down the route of asking yourself fairly existential questions that I initially, like as a teenager, started asking myself those questions and find myself in absolute like panic and couldn't really deal with it. And then the more I looked into it, the more I kind of looked within myself, and the more time I spent reading and researching how many other humans have obviously thought like this, I reached a point where I felt great, you know, and I was just like, and then spending a lot more time in kind of more original natural environments and connecting with the kind of the earth in that kind of way, it really allowed me to feel deeply connected, and that there wasn't this kind of thing to fear when it came to death in that way. Like I'd been here the whole time. I wasn't going anywhere, you know, and that allowed me to not live in a perpetual state of existential angst from that kind of teenage years into my like early 20s. But that also comes with the kind of this side narrative that you're God effectively in some ways, that like you're invincible, you're not human, you know, everything's fine. If everything's fine, everything's fine. And that has a tendency to be taken too far. And it made me quite ungrounded maybe. And maybe think I was maybe quite bulletproof in some ways.
How did that manifest?
Like
surfing maybe?
Yeah, I would say less in the physical way, more in the emotional way. More like
that resilient, thinking nothing's going to touch you.
Yeah, like never actually had, like, for example, say you wanted to do something that made you nervous. Say you'd never done public speaking before, or never done a podcast before, something like that, and you went into an environment that was like less comfortable for you. In the past, I would have been like, that initial fear would have come up, and I would have gone like, Seth, man, remember, nothing matters, you're fine, and use that story to overcome my fear. And now I'm like, yeah, that helps. That initial story as the foundation of my idea about the world is great. That's fine, but I don't want to live there either. I don't want to stay in that headspace, because there are like real world things that will help that anxiety response, that stress response, that isn't just like a story that you've overlaid on top of it, that you've just kind of like bubbled around it.
Yeah.
Things like
your diet.
Like your diet, or you could do 20 minutes of breath work before doing something you found scary, or you could get a good night's sleep. Like, you're not completely emotionally bulletproof just because you know that you are the universe.
Yeah.
You know, you also live in the human realm, and you have to do things like that. And like that's the game now. That's what I've really come into recently. Being like, it's not a failure to do these tools, to kind of learn these tools, how to navigate a human life. You don't have to be this person that thinks they're above it all. And I definitely did for a while, you know. And it's been fun kind of reconnecting with a lot of those things.
Yeah, powerful. Love that.
But I'm really glad that I went into that headspace, because it meant it got me out of that perpetual existential angst that originated from a lack of belonging as a kid, you know, or a lack of, not necessarily a lack of belonging within my own like family unit. It's not anything that like my immediate family did, but it's like the lack of belonging that we teach kids on a much bigger scale. We don't let people know that they are made of the same stuff as their environment, that they rely on their environment in that way, that the food they eat is made of the same stuff, like that you're part of this interconnected web of everything. We don't say that to kids. So you reach a point where you start asking yourself quite existential questions, and if you don't have any language to put yourself in the context of everything, you feel like an alien all the time. You feel like, well, I did anyway. I felt like a stranger, an alien on this planet, like I really didn't belong, you know. So that kind of, the readings and the teachings of these various spiritual ideas allow me to realize, like, hold on, man, you've been fooled the whole time. You are of this place. You are from this place, you know. And that's where the whole idea of my channel, that's where everything is for me, you know. It's this realization that I think people would be able to navigate their lives in a much better way if they realized that they weren't separate from the place they lived in. That has knock-on effects. They live in this endless communication and endless flow with everything around them. But yeah, I've been balancing those two things.
Do you think that was true for you in your younger years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you feel like you belonged as a kid?
I felt like I belonged on a surface level. Like I felt like I belonged within my family. I felt like I belonged within my friend groups. I felt like I belonged kind of within the context of society, maybe, but not to anything bigger than that. You know, I was in this like team of humans who are against the universe. That's what it felt like. You know, we've been thrown into this world by accident, and we're here to fight this thing. You know, and
masters of the universe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of how the narrative. It's never said to you directly, but that's how it's always implied in the way that everything. From the tiniest things, like, you know, I think quite a good example is like something like someone goes, "Oh, don't drink that water from that stream. That will make you ill." You know, and they might be true, but as a kid, that to me meant like, oh, water from streams is poisonous. Water from streams has bad stuff in it that you shouldn't drink. And now with a maybe a wider lens on that perspective, what they meant is that the things in that stream have been polluted because of human activity and maybe are filled with crap that we've put there. But if you don't explain that to a kid and go, you just can't drink that water, you go, how can I not just drink that water from the stream? I'm from the earth. What else would I have done prior to water being cleaned through a tap? You know? So it's like, unless things are explained, I think, more directly to a kid, like water at one point from that stream would have been drinkable, and now it's not because we've fucked it. You know, it has to be that way around. And yeah, if you don't, I think it can leave people feeling quite alienated, like they're always not really allowed on Earth. They're not really from this place, you know.
Where does the conversation around romantic ideas of the past fit in? Have you ever fell into that story of when you've gone too far in this direction, which is true for me, but the ideas of the past that we lived in harmony and we were connected with the land, true also, but there's polarities of that, right?
Exactly.
Where did that kind of where did that fit into the journey?
That was a big part of the journey, you know, and that's how a lot of these things manifest. You start to pick your way through the things that maybe we've changed in the things that we've corrupted in nature that we now call bad for us, but have not been bad for us because they were in their original form, but we've corrupted them over time to make them bad for us. You start to go through these things and go like, well, if that didn't used to be as bad, that didn't used to be as bad, that didn't used to be, and you go through all of them, you go like, well, at some point on this planet, we did live in a way that all these things weren't bad for us, or our environments weren't polluting us, or whatever it is. That's quite an overarching way of describing it. But
where do you think that was?
When do I think that was?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think it's just way less black and white than that. For a long time, I definitely felt like that, and I felt this kind of rage to want to live kind of much more primally, you know. So definitely fits into my story. The one thing I really do still hold true in that in that idea is like, obviously, like in pre-civilization worlds,
Agriculture.
maybe pre-agriculture, even say hunter-gatherer kind of worlds, maybe that's the point that a lot of people romanticize. I know I did.
Okay. Yeah.
I now don't completely romanticize that, and I see that it also wasn't perfect then. But I think there's something to be said. Like there is still, there was obviously lots of pain then and difficulty, like kind of physical difficulty. But I get the impression that there was maybe less, like, kind of spiritual dis-ease about the world. You know, I think people knew. I get the impression that people were much more in their own skin, even though stuff died around them and life was hard and kids died and people died during pregnancy and food might have been scarce and the winters were really gnarly and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that necessarily there was this like kind of feeling of lack of belonging and being devoid of any kind of spiritual direction. And I think everything's flipped now, you know, like our lives are much, much easier, but we're all confused and don't really know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm often like, which one would you rather live in? You know, so I like, and now I guess try and make both. You know.
Yeah. What makes sense to me is we take life really seriously. We take it really seriously. No, actually, it's the other way around. We don't take life seriously, but we take spirituality really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But if you probably went back in some time, spirituality was less serious, but life was really serious.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And lots of corners in the world like that practice in that way.
Yeah.
Like it helps shift a lot for me. But I think, the hunter-gatherer, I think there was you see it and you observe it and you listen to Bruce Parry speak about the time he spent in communities that really have like a symbiotic relationship with everything, and they are attuned to the environment which they live in, and they move around, they go from place to place, but it doesn't leave them, that relationship they have. It's essentially the story we have about what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
That was the original start to the podcast of like, because we're so confused about what it really means, because people don't tell the story anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Corporations tell the story. They tell you what it means to be human and what it doesn't mean and what you need to be human and all the rest that fits into that. But yeah, I don't feel I was once foraging around for like the truth, the real truth of like reading books like Guns, Germs and Steel and like Sapiens, and just trying to understand who am I, where have I spent most of my existence as a human, and what makes more sense to fit in now, and how can I hack my way back into that, but complement now and feed it in, hence the hacking of biology, which is I guess kind of feeds into that. But it doesn't really, you don't really need to know. But there's a lot we can take. We don't need to know the whole truth of what was, but there's a lot of it that we can understand and realize of how we spent most of our existence and how we can use that to our advantage. Like, where would we have spent most of our time? How would we have moved? What was our relationship like with the planet? And how we've moved around in that environment. And it's all those things that we can break down, but you can fit into that holistic kind of way of looking. And
then reintroduce just those bits.
Yeah.
And leave out like the infant mortality rates and things like that. You know.
You don't need that.
You don't need that. So you can just, But I think that for a long time there was this idea that, like, now we're civilized and back then it was bad. You know, back then it was all bad, and there's nothing we can learn from kind of more primal cultures.
Yeah, nature has no place in the modern day.
Exactly.
Which is something my dad said once.
He actually said that. Yeah, that's
it was amazing. We were around a fire,
really,
ironically.
Wow.
It was really stark, and I want to call him in on that if he ever listens to this, because it's an important, and I'm curious about why someone does think or say that.
Yeah.
Why that? Because this narrative exists. It still exists. Not in my circles.
No, exactly. And that's why when you're in those circles, you have a tendency to take it then too far within that circle.
Sure.
You know. But yeah, it definitely does exist in other circles.
Yeah.
Nature is the enemy.
Absolutely. Well, we've experienced that in COVID times, right? How were those times for you? Did you? Yeah, I don't know how much you want to share. Hopefully, everything.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to share.
I think it's a poignant reference point. We don't need to go into the ins and outs of it all, but it's like a poignant reference of like, what this could have been, but wasn't.
Yeah.
But how things shifted so quickly overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Also inspiring, because we
Yeah.
can do that. We can do that. We can create
Yeah.
money, and we can use it to flip the world on its head,
Yeah.
change systems and structures in a moment.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we did it to to kind of batten down the hatches and just instill fear into a lot of people, which
Mhm.
confused a lot and separated.
Mhm.
Is a big thing that happened. But yeah, those years, what was that like for you? Learning about this stuff, like on that journey of like
Yeah.
the past 8 years.
I wasn't really learning much about this stuff then.
Mm-hmm.
That was a period in my life where I was doing other things, and a lot of these things had taken the back seat. Virtually all the things that I've implemented into my life that I consider super positive in the last few years have been after COVID, and that was a tipping point. I was particularly indulgent during COVID, and I had a few months of like really not looking after myself. And like if I was to do, if I had the opportunity to do a lockdown again now, I'd do it in a very, very different way. But I was like, just right at that age where I saw it as an opportunity to just like, I just don't give a fuck about anything, and that kind of manifested in kind of still within the household, but like kind of partying too much and drinking too much and eating not very well. And like I remember doing Zoom calls with some of my mates at the time and then being like, wow, Seth, you do not look well, and it was the least present in my body I'd ever been.
What do you think the root of that was?
Just like the headspace I was in then was I was really trying to work out like if life is important, like is life important or is it not important? And if it is, I'm going to do everything right. And if it's not important, I'm going to do whatever I want. And whatever I want includes like ordering takeaways every day, drinking every night, doing whatever it is, because I thought that was the idea of what I wanted, because there was a distrust within myself. What I thought I wanted, was doing all the indulgent, nice but bad things, because that's kind of the narrative I'd almost been sold in some ways. Like if you leave yourself to your own devices, you'll fall into these traps of indulgence, and you can't really trust yourself in that kind of way. So I kind of lived up to that. I was like, the world's falling apart anyway. Who gives a fuck? I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And what I thought I wanted to do was just abuse myself and just fall into those traps. And now I don't do a lot of those things, not because I just don't want to do them. Not because there's a whole different narrative around it. I've looked around the problem in a different kind of way. But then that I was stuck between these two polarities. Like, is life worth being good for, or if it's not, if it's just a big joke, then whatever. I'll do whatever. I'll just whatever. Eat loads of chocolate and drink loads of pints.
Yeah. Do you think the motivation to do those things just came from not caring, and that was it? It was just like a choice. I don't care. I'm not gonna think too much about what I want my life to be like.
Well, I thought there wasn't going to be a future. I think, like that plus kind of environmental breakdown in other ways, like whether that's however you want that, however that makes sense to you, environmental breakdown. But these kind of feelings that everything around me was collapsing, and then like various people being in power and like everything I saw in the news just
there was a lot of reasons to just not.
Yeah, I just was like, fuck this, and that was the tipping point. I was like, wow, no one else cares, no one else gives a shit about this world, no one else kind of. This is obviously not this place is, we're here to have a party, obviously, so just do that and don't worry about it. I wasn't like depressed at the time either. I just was doing that, I was like, I'm here to party, we'll do that then. And
do you think that looked differently if there was more structure systems set up, that because you must have been 21?
Yeah.
So systems and structures set up to kind of bring you into that new stage of your life, perhaps, where
Absolutely.
important things do come in, responsibility, whatever that looks like. But I know you went to Sacred Sons. Let's bring in that. Like, they are of course, big on, and they've got a son's youth happening, and I think in America, but probably move over here. It's like, how do we take, like, because we can all relate to that. Like, I have had my fair share of thinking life's a party, and it's so normal to think that way. Kind of is for a stage of our life. If you get into a groove of university, etc., or just the circles we exist in, it just feels that way. Like, what's the consequence of that, I guess? Is that an initiation to some sort of elderhood? And then what? Does it continue?
Yeah.
Like it may for a lot of people. Like I observe that still happening for a lot of people into 30s. And what comes in, what came in for you to kind of sever that and be like, oh no, there's more to this, and there's more I want to do, and there's more I want to create. There's a lifestyle that I want to be in, which makes more sense and is more sustainable than this.
Yeah.
That maybe I'll ask a question around Sacred Sons and like what you're seeing and learning from that space.
Yeah. Well, Sacred Sons is quite a lot further down the journey than that for me. Like then I wouldn't have been ready for that. I would have just laughed at it, I think.
Same.
The thing that broke me out of that headspace during COVID, I think originally, was that I just had enough. You know, like I just felt too shit physically. You know, I was like, I just don't want to feel like this anymore. So I think that's what eventually pulled me out. And I feel very fortunate that for whatever reasons, whether it's nature or nurture, I don't know what it is, but like I never went to university, so they those few months kind of operated as my university months, just partied every night and didn't care. And I got that out of my system, and I really needed to get it out of my system. I'm kind of glad it happened in that way, you know. I would do it differently now, but like I'm glad it happened. But also I'm aware that a lot of people that's not where they get to, you know. A couple of months of doing that doesn't go, oh, that's enough now. So it made me realize I did have a limit. Like I do have a point where I want to stop this, you know, and it might be, that might not be on a daily basis, but it might eventually go like, you've done that for 2 months now, 3 months now, whatever, like you've had enough. And I'm a self-regulating being in that way, in the same way that the dog is with his food, you know. You've had enough, and you'll know when that is, and that kind of really comes back to the trust and kind of talking, kind of being honest with yourself and talking that through. You know, you have to kind of, in many ways, you kind of have to just go through it. But I think it was also like for the last 2 years, I would have really, really needed some kind of initiation experience, you know,
or an intervention,
of
some sort.
Exactly. And I don't know. I mean, I'm very lucky in a lot of ways that I have some of these interventions, you know, and I have these people that from various periods of my life that have been pieces of the puzzle of that intervention, I suppose, that I could lean on again after and kind of reconnect with. But yeah, just so many of us feel as if that's a direction we have to go through. You know, even me, even sitting here now, having kind of had those few years or few months more concentrated versions during COVID, where I had to take it to those extremes. We do kind of think that is some kind of youth initiation in some kind of way. Oh, like my party years are done. Oh, I used to smoke, but now I don't. Or I used to be able to drink 12 pints, not 2. Kind of like there's this whole like narrative that comes around it, and even a lot of older people play up to it. Like, oh, he's 17, let him do whatever he wants to do. You know, not realizing that there's a far deeper need in that person for an extreme experience, for a deep extreme experience. But because we've had so many generations now where that seems to be fulfilled on the surface level through indulgence and through partying, we go like, oh, that's just what being a British kid is. We just call that culture. Yeah. You know, and
phase.
It's like a phase, exactly, and it doesn't actually lead to any initiation at all in many ways. Maybe it does. Maybe there probably are some aspects of it that are not all bad, but largely it's not a substitute for an initiation that is curated by older people.
Yeah, I think the initiation, the idea of that is that psychologically before and after looks very different,
Mm-hmm.
and you're transitioning into someone new,
Yeah.
and you have to shed and let go of all the old kind of stories and the old parts of yourself that don't serve you in the next phase.
Mm-hmm.
And that can look so many different for so many different people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we can look at so many things like that. But it's got a framework to it, right?
Yeah. And it needs a
Because,
guide, I
yeah.
think.
For sure.
You know, when it's like in the party scene, everyone of a similar age is kind of guiding each other in like a. It's like there isn't this overarching
So
thing that
who
kind of.
can drink the most?
Yeah,
They
exactly.
will lead the way.
They will lead the way, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's what I needed from Sacred Sons. Like that's why I looked for a different kind of
Mm.
initiation experience. And my intention for going in, the thing I wrote on the form before I went in was like, I want to find like true elders, true people, kind of older men who I consider really worth looking up to, you know, who would guide me through it, could see me as the 24-year-old me and go like, you don't have to know everything now. You don't have to be wise. You don't have to be older than you are or any of these things. Like you can be your age and we're going to guide you through that. And part of me wishes I had it earlier, but maybe I wouldn't have engaged with it earlier. It came exactly when it needed to, I think, for me. But I'd like an environment where more people saw the value of that younger, you know.
Who in your life has really seen you? Who in your life has really known your potential and voiced that to you? Do you think that's happened?
I think snippets of it, you know. I think snippets of the potential has, or their idea of what my potential could be. You know, I have like I've kind of built up kind of like a structure of elders or a parent or like an idea of a parent or like the father that I've kind of built through various people who've helped me through like amazing things at various times, but I would say nothing on a much bigger scale. Not one individual who's seen the full potential of me. I think just snippets from each person, you know.
Yeah, more I'm noticing and moving through my journey how vital that is. I feel for us as men. I'm going to speak for me as a man. I feel like so much value, and I think we need it. I think we need people to see us in our struggle, but also doing our best. It's like it's not always necessary, but I think it really fucking helps. Really helped. It's helped me in the few moments. There's not been many, but there's a few times where I've been felt really seen by, even whether it's brothers, but in that parental role, you know, when I'm like heads in my hands or I'm kind of in my child self and I'm trying to shed those layers. It's been pivotal.
And have they been individual people, or have they been more like
Definitely not
people?
a group. Yeah, it's been more of a couple of individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony's been one of them for sure. Yeah, he's definitely helped me. He's really good at doing that. He is like, as an elder would, he sees someone and he's happy to give them a platform. So it's great that he's got his podcast now because he can kind of do that in another way. But he's been doing that since I've known him. Yeah, powerful man. Yeah. So I think I'd also like to dive into is the foraging. Now I know you say you're not a forager, and it's like kind of a tiny bit of what you're really curious about. But like any opportunity, I like to speak to it because I did this thing. I think it was like a year and maybe 2 years ago in January. I've talked about it a few times. This thing called local annuary. So I tried to just eat local for January. Yeah. And I went around so many different shops and markets, and I got all this food on the table, and I was like, okay, this is me now. Looked at it, all looked the same, and I was like, okay, so I guess this is going to be very challenging. And just there's going to be minimal taste to any of this. It's going to take a lot of resources to learn. I mean, of course I could have got by, but I'd suffered really in the process to what I'm used to. And I was like very overwhelmed. I haven't got the capacity for this right now. And then you realise, okay, you've got to kind of prepare for these things. We're in the midst of winter, and we just need flavours. Like pepper and like just things that spices that I'm very used to cooking with,
Mm.
and herbs that are just not grown locally. Not that I could, but it would have took research, would have taken more understanding, and because I feel like we have this misconception. We go into a supermarket and we're like blown away with all this amazing, colourful food, but it's really just a snapshot when you really look at what is local and the abundance of that. But all this stuff from around the world, we're sold this idea of it's the most abundant thing you could possibly want. But it's not that. It's the stuff that's been easy to grow, it's been easy to manufacture, easy to mass produce, and it's been so select some stuff. It's been selected and over time just like modified. But like when we really dive into the amazing well of food which is around us, it's incredible. It's like really like it hit me, like it really like viscerally hit me when I was like, wow, there is just a lot, and it's really on us now. There's no one around. Well, there's more due to the power of networks, but it's on us to actually dive into this stuff and re-approach and remember what is there and how we can kind of bring this in. Like it's happening, but not very often, not very much, not to the scale that my imagination sees it. And you drive around fields in this country and it's just like, oh yeah, it's really hard to grow food around here. But it doesn't feel, that doesn't make sense to me. And that doesn't feel right. So like what we can imagine is creative ways of doing these things, and how much abundance, and like almost like there's a creative way of doing all this. Like you see, I've been to farms and they're doing like no dig, and then they've got this like biodiversity like thing happening, and you're like, wow, there's a lot happening here, and it all seems to be working in symbiosis and there's this abundance of food. So foraging, like how does that, you speak to anything that I've touched upon?
The bit that I'd touch upon is that locanuary bit you did, you know. To live in the far south or the far north is to experience like seasons, and the nature of summer is abundance, and the nature of winter is scarcity largely, or at least it changes slightly, you know. And foraging is one half of the equation, and preserving is the other half. And there's so much of foraging is setting yourself up for the more scarce months. And there are things to forage throughout the winter, but largely the stuff you want to forage is through the spring and in the summer and in the autumn. And there might be opportunities for eating more wild animals in the winter, but largely most of the vegetation is through the summer and the spring and the autumn. So I think it really comes back to being in one place, you know, to preserve things, to have a garden, to have a connection to local food. It can't just be about going and buying the local thing necessarily. What it really means is being connected to the season, because it's a dream of myself and of many other people is that a successful life is one that you're moving around a lot, one that you live in different places around the world. You kind of, as a kid, I would have dreamed of living somewhere that was hot all the time, you know, or maybe just traveling non-stop and doing all these things, you know. But I'm realizing now to live in abundance is to pick a place and to make that place what you want it to be. And it's almost seen as a failure to a lot of people to live in the town that you grew up in, you know, to buy a house or to live in that place from where you were as a kid. But I think we really need to shift the narrative of like living in one spot, you know, and that like home is where you make it, and
valuing that,
you know. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and do the kind of the homestead off-grid style thing, but it means that you commit to that local community. That means you like You want to have friends in that place. You want to have people to lean on in that place. You want to know the food of that place, the trees of that place. You want to have a place to grow your own food, or a place that you share, that you grow that your own food. Because ultimately, to be able to preserve things and prepare for the winter, you need a place. That's the bottom line. And if you're moving all the time, you will have left your pickles somewhere else. So you have to stock up. It has to be in this kind of in a house or in a van or whatever. But a big chunk of the real estate that you take up has to be food for the winter if you're going to live in that kind of way and learning those skills. And it's a slow, patient process to do it, but even more so to learn it. And
so you're saying I should prioritize pickling and preserving before colour grading?
Absolutely, yeah. I would shoot the internal picture profiles before you learn how to pickle. And I'm at the moment I'm writing a script about the winter. Like, I did a poll on my Instagram about how many people struggle with winter, because I used to hugely struggle with the winter. I'd get to this month, September, and the associations of September with going back to school and going back into the darkness, and the clock's about to change, and this like inbuilt time and this clock in me about school, and knowing that all my waking hours in the daylight were gonna have to be indoors now mainly, and I'd have this huge fear around it, knowing that the fun of the summer was gone. You've had your fun, now you're back to work.
Absolutely, that's conditioned heavily.
Really and I want to write. I'm going to write like a longer video about that, a longer script about the things that I've learned over the last few years that really helped me, because I used to be like terrified and like find it incredibly depressing, and I would have called myself someone with like seasonal affective disorder, and a sad disorder. There was people in my family who do have that, and I kind of jumped onto that. I was like, oh well, that's me as well. Then I really struggle with that. I just kind of labeled myself with it. I'm not saying that it's not true, but I'm just saying I'm not saying that's not true for anyone, but I'm just saying for me that was something I jumped on because I had never learned any tools to navigate a winter, because we don't want to dive into that. And now the things I've learned, I feel like a lot of people could value for, and the amount of people on my, like, I think 60% of my followers who answered the poll said they struggle with winter or get to the winter and are scared of it.
Interesting. Yeah, doesn't surprise me. I think it's interesting when we label things, like how much does that help? It might put some context into it, and it might help you find other people in that same situation, but then what? It's like, do you want to continue with that and in that victim mentality, or are we here to create the life we want? And it's like, context is so important, but then like, where do we go from that? That's your platform. Like,
exactly, it's different for everyone, isn't it? I know people who take huge amounts of comfort and solace in these kind of labels, particularly in the kind of the diagnostic medical way, and that really helps them navigate their life. For me, I'm not one of those people. I find that the label slows me down, and it means I conform to something that I didn't think through myself. I left it in the hands of a professional to tell me who I am, and sometimes that's fantastic, but largely I find it hasn't helped, so I try not to go there. But I also wouldn't take that away, and there's people definitely I know that like really, really vibe with that, and I think it's just worth questioning whatever thing that you've labeled. You can still label yourself that, but just be like, maybe I've got that thing, but maybe it's like not as severe as they're talking about. Maybe there are ways to decrease that, and you might find that you work out some tools and you go, oh, maybe I don't have that thing anymore. But that was definitely the case for me with this. Like,
it's when we attach, right? It's the attachment we have to the label.
Exactly.
Because it puts us in a box.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see. Everything changes, right? In this case, seasonal, but like when the winter comes around, that might look different. You might not have as harsh a winter as you are anticipating, but you're still preempting that because you're going into this thinking you have that disorder. The word disorder is interesting. That's thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, continue foraging.
And
how do you learn? How did you start learning about this? Do you have like go-to resources? Are you just a passionate fan of Forage by Fern?
All of it.
She was one of the first people that I was like, wow,
really?
Foraging can be cool.
Yeah. Well, I think people are just so desperate for it. That's what I realised from my channel and how quickly it blew up. It's just like people want to know this stuff. People want to reconnect to the land. They want to reconnect to themselves
in fun ways.
Yeah. Like there are so many amazing ways to do this, and it's better than the alternative, basically. Like if you can work out how to do it.
But you're learning around this, like resources.
Yeah, I just try and cross-reference resources because there obviously is like a fear element to foraging, which I'm very accustomed to now, and that like fear of eating something that's going to make you unwell or potentially kill you. So, like all things, there is a fear element, there's a danger element, and it's worth doing your research. And I cross-reference resources, books, Instagram channels, YouTube videos. I generally find Instagram is the thing throughout the foraging seasons that plants a seed in me, to use the pun, that like goes like, oh, I've never heard of that thing before, I've seen a forager foraging that and that's come out this week, they filmed it on their iPhone, that must mean that's seasonal right now. That then takes me to a book maybe to find out what that is, and then from that, once I found out exactly what the thing is, and then might type that in, like how to forage that certain thing on YouTube, and find a YouTube account who are masters at foraging, and then and if it's like lined up on a few different platforms and a few different resources, then I know it's legit. But I never go off just one thing. I've also got a guy down like not far from here who I really respect and go foraging with often, and he taught me quite a lot of stuff. He's like an older guy, he lives in a teepee. He's fantastic.
Great.
And so also finding people in your local area and paying for this knowledge. This knowledge is stuff that in a totally ideal world you would have been passed down for free by generations. We've lost that, and now I make money to pay people to fill in these gaps because I want to know these things, and I have to find that energy resource from a different place. I'm not going to get it from my ancestors, so I have to get it from someone else, and I have to pay that people for that knowledge. If I want it in person, that's fine for me. I think investing into it as well, like 10-20 quid here and there, if you can pay someone for a few hour walk,
absolutely,
to really learn that hands-on, because there's the trust that you gain from doing it in person means you don't have to do that. Like there's always this thing where you go and eat something where if you've done all the research yourself and you go and eat something for the first time just completely off your own research, that like there's almost a precipice you have to jump over. Like, yeah, you've done all the research, you're like, I'm 100% sure that's what that thing is, but there's always that first time where like you have to go, well, I need to try it now, and trust that your research is right. And there's this kind of, it's a bit like dropping on a vert ramp on a skateboard or something. There's the point where you'd be like, well, I'm going to throw myself over that and see what happens over the next half an hour. And if you trust yourself and you've done all the research, but you're going to be fine then. And I've been fine up until this point. But if you do it with someone who knows what they're doing, that like doing it by yourself feeling really doesn't have to be as intense. And I probably prefer it that way now.
What about picture this?
Picture this?
The app.
Oh, the app. Oh, no.
No
apps. I don't. An app might be like a good starting place to get a rough idea, but I never use any of the apps to actually eat something. If you don't know what it is and you take a photo with an app and you go, I think that it might get you in the right ballpark of somewhere, but then I'd go to a book which shows loads of things that are similar to that thing in one place. Or the other really good thing to type in is like lookalikes for a certain thing. So do like dandelion lookalikes or something, and I type that in or search that for like everything I eat, even if I've eaten it loads of times before, because it's just to refresh, just to make 100% sure. And often you'll find there might be lookalikes to something, but they're just not poisonous, and you're going to be fine. So then it might be worth the attempt. But there might be something that's a super average thing to eat, like some of the things in like the kind of wild parsley family, which is like one just will kill you and one just tastes like parsley, and I'm not going to risk my life for parsley.
This is true. So the same with mushrooms, really.
Yeah. Well, mushrooms, that I think is better bang for your buck.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's the impression I get anyway.
What is it? Are we coming into mushroom picking season? I think we are.
We're kind of in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we had quite a wet summer, so there was quite a lot of early mushrooms this year.
There was a lot. Yeah, I've seen a lot. There's a lot.
There's quite a lot around. I think it's different for all different mushrooms. We haven't had any frost yet. The first frost is something that can like.
It's like a day after a frost, isn't it? When the sun hits the hill or something.
I'm not sure about that, but I've always heard that the frost can be a thing that like stops that. Like when the first frost comes, that could be the end of the mushroom season for some mushrooms, but I don't think it's for all. It's like a bit of a rough indication, I think. So generally, that like end of August, if it's been wet, or further north through to kind of October, November.
Yeah, I lived near Newcastle for like 4 years.
To get some good stuff up that way.
Yeah. It was like all the time.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Anything you want to touch upon? What do you want to point people to? And how can people contribute to your work?
I don't know how anyone could contribute to my work, really. I don't really have anything to shout out yet. You could, I suppose you could buy me a coffee through my app if that's something you'd like to do. It's not through the like through the link on my Instagram. Yeah. But no, I think the only thing that I would say is that a lot of this remembering process and rewilding process or whatever, a lot of what people are kind of this journey that as a culture we're on and a lot of people are on, it's in all of us, and it's not gatekept by anyone, and you don't have to be a master scientist or master forager or a master dietitian or any of these things. These deep human core values to me are things that anyone can look into, research and teach as well, and as long as you kind of teach with a fairly open mind about it and not feel too definite about what you're talking about, but just try and share this information. I don't feel as if I have any problems sharing what the local plants are in my environment, because I think they're mine to share and they're everyone's to share. They're not gatekept by foragers and scientists and dietitians and any of these kind of people, so like this rewilding process is really, really for everyone, and the amount that people want this information is reflected in how quickly I grew a following, and in 5 months went from 0 to 123,000 followers, and it's just a video about normal British plants in my garden, and I've got the camera again, I've got the skills to make videos, but what I'd say is the way that you can contribute to me is by contributing to the more global community of this reawakening, this remembrance of a lot of the things that we've come from, and reconnecting with the earth, and just find your corner of that and share it and teach people, and there's plenty of room for you on these platforms.
Absolutely. I think it's doing wonders for people. Just if people keep speaking to this remembering, this learning old ways that served us for so long, and that we don't value anymore. We don't see the value in it, but it really is what everyone's kind of looking for. The world doesn't need anyone to have more money or have more success. It needs people to connect to their communities and their selves and their health. And really, we're seeing that shift, but it's happening slowly. It needs to be ramped up a little bit, but this is what you're contributing to,
and it's what you're contributing as well.
Yeah,
man.
Really
feel really grateful for you having kind of platforms like this and inviting me on to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Good, man. Beautiful.
It's been nice to finally chat. I feel like we've bumped into each other a couple of times, but been keeping the conversation at arm's length just for the podcast. Now we can chat openly forever.
Yes, that happens when I meet someone. I'm like, there's a subconscious avoidance of going deep. Yeah. Beautiful, man. Well, thank you for the journey you're on. It's powerful. I can't wait to, like, when I meet people like you, I'm like, God, I'm excited to meet them in 10 years.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all so new, And like I try not to think about it too hard where I'm gonna end up, and if I can carve out a bit of a life for myself, just reconnecting with the earth and reminding other people that they can do that too, and keep plodding along, then that's what I'd like to do. I don't really want to do much more than that. I'm not really interested in like super nice stuff or like going far away. I just want to do this, and
I love that reframe around staying in a community. It's something that I've been yearning for, and I know it will come. There's some things I got to do first, but it's the community aspect is really, really important to me. Like, I value it so much. I think it is the thing. It's the thing that people go into their old age because of, and with a poor diet, because they have such an intricate connection with their surroundings and the people that are living with them. I think it's just so powerful, such a remedy. But yeah, man, appreciate you, man. Part of the community.
Yeah, it's great.
Here's your hug, man.